Welcome to the Capital Gains Tax Solutions podcast, where we believe most high net worth individuals and those who help them, they struggle with clarifying their capital gains tax deferral options. Not having a clear plan is the enemy, and using a proven tax deferral strategy such as the Deferred Sales Trust is the best way for you to exit highly appreciated real estate, business, or cryptocurrency so you can defer millions of tax and create and preserve more wealth. Hey, I'm your host, Brett Swarts. In each episode, I'm joined by some of the best real estate, financial, wealth, and business minds in the world where they share their ideas, deal stories, and inspiration. So together we can make complex tax deferral strategies simple and passive income plans achievable. We're also streaming on expertcresecrets.com for all of our listeners out there. Thanks so much for listening. Hey, I'm excited about our next guest. He's originally from Brazil, and he's in North Carolina these days. And he's a specialist in all things Section 8 investing in real estate. And he's acquired over 400 rental properties in North Carolina, South Carolina, Tennessee, and Ohio. And he spent over 9 years of acquiring these properties through Section 8 program. And he secured over $25 million in commercial and creative financing deals. And he's built an efficient property management team to aggressively scale this portfolio. He's a coach and he's a real estate expert. Please welcome to the show with me, Tom Cruz. Hey, Tom, how you doing?
Good, man. Thank you for having me on the show. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. And for our listeners getting to know you for the first time, would you give us a little bit more about your story and your current focus?
Yeah, I'm originally from Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. I grew up in North Carolina, and I went to University of North Carolina at Wilmington. Graduated. I started real estate by doing wholesaling. I got into wholesaling pretty early on. Used that to generate essentially capital to be able to start buying condos and eventually getting into single-family rentals on Section 8.
Fantastic. And take us back to the days earlier, maybe in the high school days, right? I believe we've all been given certain gifts, or some people call them strengths and superpowers. And I believe these gifts have been given to us to be a blessing and help to others. So I'm curious, what are those one or two gifts that you believe you were given, and how does that help how you help and bless people today?
I would say I definitely got kind of the entrepreneurial bug from my parents, the stubbornness, the persistence, and also the creativity, which is required to be able to make it work. And I carry that on through, building the portfolio. I just never took no for an answer, never looked at any problem that couldn't be overcome. Didn't have enough money. That's fine. Figure out another way around it. Lenders didn't want to work with it. No problem. Let's find another lender. It didn't appraise. Tenant issues, property management issues. There's always a million issues that come up when you're dealing with real estate, and you have to quickly become a problem solver or you will not last very long.
Absolutely love that. And by the way, you can learn more about Tom Cruz at section8formula.com. That's section8formula.com. So let's dive right into the show, which is Section 8 real estate and how to acquire that. So what's the number one secret, Tom, when it comes to acquiring and building wealth with Section 8 housing and financing and anything else that you're doing there?
Yeah, I mean, the big thing is going to be finding the right units. For me, it's all about finding the right markets. I really like Ohio, Indiana, South Carolina, North Carolina, and Tennessee. Towards the Southeast, there's a ton of properties that you can buy $700,000. And really, it's an arbitrage between the fair market rents that Section 8 will pay, and then also the lower mortgage and debt service costs that you'll have on these assets. I mean, I'm buying $60,000 units, putting 20% down, financing $48,000. And having a $300-$400 mortgage, and Section 8's paying $1,200 a month all day on that, on a 3 or 4 bedroom in these areas. So that's the first step. It's just identifying markets and properties, and then everything else is secondary. I mean, financing just comes with it. Once you show banks these, crazy DSCRs and guaranteed, rental income, they also like the affordable, housing credits that come with loaning against this type of collateral. So all that plays into it.
Excellent. So what's the biggest challenge with Section 8 housing, and maybe dispel some myths of some people might have about it?
Yeah, I mean, the biggest challenge is inspections, right? I mean, that's the only thing that's different than a standard rental is you don't have Section 8. They come and inspect every year, and you have to make sure you stay on top of that, because if you fail the inspections and you fail it again on the reinspection, they stop paying you. That's really the only downside to it. But and then the common myths are the usual ones where, Section 8 tenants will destroy your units. It's not the case. If you have a tenant that is regular and you have a tenant that's on Section 8, it's a payment method. That's really the only difference. If you screen both tenants and they both are, quality people with decent credit scores and no criminal backgrounds and no evictions and good landlord references, it doesn't really matter what program they're on.
Got it. And do you find that it's when your screening process, what have you improved over the years to make sure that you are finding good tenants?
Yeah, we go really in depth. I mean, we're checking evictions, we're checking background, we're checking credit. We also I have my property managers go to the tenant's existing place that they're renting and check to see how they're living currently. So they'll go and check their exterior, make sure that it's not overgrown lawn, not trash and abandoned cars in the front, and then they'll do a home visit and go inside and make sure that dogs aren't destroying it, and there's not holes in all the walls. So it's pretty in depth as far as how we screen tenants for Section 8.
I think that's really smart, and I think that's like that next area of thoughtfulness, right? To say, hey, we're gonna go spend some time with you, right? It's like if you were to hire somebody on your team or bring in any kind of relationship, right, which is essentially what's happening. It's a business relationship. You would spend some time with them in their current state, right? And so I think that's really wise to actually go to their place of residence. And I'd imagine there's not a lot of pushback, or if there were a lot of pushback, then that probably means it's a red flag, right?
Yeah, I mean, occasionally it's definitely off the wall, and they're always like, "Why do you need to look at my house?" And I was like, "Because it's going to tell us how you're going to treat our house." And they're like, "Oh, well, I guess that makes sense." And it's not like a surprise visit. I mean, we'll schedule it with them, but there's certain things that you can't hide. I mean, smells you can't hide. Flooring and drywall doesn't get fixed overnight. There's a lot smoking. If it's in the air, it's going to be in the air. So you can tell a lot about just about going into those units.
So smart, and I think it's overlooked. Honestly, I've been in the multifamily real estate game and development game since I was a child, and brokerage and owning, and I've never thought of doing it that way. Right? It's always you come and tour the property we have and see if it's a good fit for you. But how about we go tour your property you're living now and make sure you're a good fit for us? It's common sense, but I feel like it's overlooked, Tom. So who gave you that idea, and what part of the process do you do that in the very beginning? Or of course, you probably want to, before you spend some time, make sure they have the credit score. Are you running the credit score and the eviction and the background checks? Are you spending the money? Or are they paying for that? What part of the process is the visit? Is it towards the end, in the middle, or the beginning?
It's definitely towards the end as far as they have to go through all the screenings. There's no point in going through all that and then coming to find out that they had 3 evictions on the record. We're not even going to go bother to do it. So we do our full suite of checking, and then afterwards we'll go and check that.
How often are you guys like, oh, this is going to be a great tenant? I mean, you've probably done so many of these now, but then you actually do the visit and you're like, oh my gosh, like run the other way. Like give me that percentage wise there.
It's very small. I would say less than 10%, because if they're a quality tenant, if the landlord gives a good reference, if their employer gives a good reference, if their credit is well and decent, and there is no evictions, the probability is actually really low. We rarely get surprised on things like that.
What if they're like out of state and they're like, hey, I'm moving to North Carolina from California or New York, right? And you don't have, do you just send someone there like with a FaceTime video, like real time? Like, what are you doing there?
I have my property manager go and look at the unit. Yeah.
Like if they live in New York, you're gonna have them fly over there?
No. It's very rare that happens. Section 8 tenants, for the most part, are staying in city. And if they are coming from out of state, or if they're transferring a voucher, then we just do additional screening just to get a good sense. Or we've had them send us pictures of their current place.
Okay. Yeah. So send pictures. That's smart too. So very cool. All right. So thanks for going on a little bit of a tangent there, but I thought that was really interesting the way you've done that and how you've set that up. And so you've been able to scale right through Section 8. I think maybe partly because you focused on it like a laser, right? And then you've built that up, and now you've moved into helping others do the same, right? So take us to that process when you start to become a coach, you start to help others build their wealth with Section 8.
Yeah, so I've been on TikTok and Instagram for the last couple of years, and a big thing that keeps coming up is, how do I get started? How do I buy my first property? And eventually I just kind of put together a whole course on it and explained it step by step, how to find the best markets that's going to cash flow, how to find the best properties, how to find the right financial products, how to screen tenants, how to manage tenants, and then how to retain tenants for long term. So that was just the natural progression. And then it's very niche, and there's not that many people that have done it at scale or this fast. So it makes things a lot more interesting, because everyone's talking about Airbnb, everyone's talking about wholesaling, everyone's talking about BRRRR, all of which require quite a bit of money on the front end. Here, you're buying $60,000 units. With 15% down, you can get away with buying a unit for $10,000 to $12,000, which makes it a lot more realistic for a lot more people, and it's guaranteed. In 2020, we had our best year ever during the global pandemic, because we had no turnover, we had guaranteed rents, and all of our banks were paid. So it worked out really well.
Yeah, it makes perfect sense. So let's walk through an example right now, right, on the average deal, because I think you touched on some of these specs, but you're saying maybe the average property is going to cost $60,000, right? And is the average down payment $10,000? Is that a fair? Did I hear that right? Or give me kind of the.
Yeah, I mean, 10,000 would be a pretty, I mean, if you found like a seller finance deal and they would allow that, but there are some private lenders that will do 15% down on 60 grand. You're going to be around, yeah, 9 to 10K.
Okay. And then are you typically doing value add, improving these properties, or are you typically buying them turnkey and then just managing it? What's the feel for that, or the percentages of that?
I'm not doing a ton of work on them because tenants stay in there long term. I mean, we have tenants that have been there for 6, 7, 8 years. So we're just getting them ready to pass inspection cosmetically. But outside of that, we're not really handling too much past that. It's we're getting it structurally ready, cleaned, and then making sure everything works and appliances before we go too much further.
Got it. And what's the average rent on a deal like that? If you bought it for 60,000, let's say you put $10,000 down, an average mortgage, average rent, and then the average cash flow after expenses.
I would say you're looking at, and depending on the area, for example, in North Carolina and Wilmington right now, a 3 bedroom is going for $1,550 per month in New Hanover County. And you're buying them for right now 90 to 100K. So it's a little bit more than you would in Akron, Ohio, for example. With 90K, you're putting 18 grand down. At that point, you're financing 72,000. You're probably going to be sitting around 500-600 bucks a month, principal, interest, taxes, and insurance. You can figure 1% of the purchase price for the property tax, and then about similar for insurance here with wind and hail because we have hurricanes. So yeah, I mean, in that case, you're going to be with management, maintenance, vacancies. You'll probably be in 750, 800. So at 1,500 rent, 1,550 rent on a 3 bedroom, there's still quite a bit of margin there. And I really target $600 a month net cash flow per unit.
Got it. So 600 is the target cash flow after all the expenses,
Correct.
including the
It's around
insurance.
55 to 60% cash on cash return.
Excellent. And then now I think the biggest question is property management, right? And
Right.
and collecting the rents, and that maybe the biggest thing that you maybe focus on. So you mentioned that a little bit, but these different marketplaces in different states, right? How are you building and scaling your property management to make sure that you're collecting the rents on time and doing the things that the properties aren't falling apart?
Yeah, I hire a full-time property manager. I don't use property management companies. It's good if you're starting because it's only 10% or 12%, and it makes sense, when you're dealing with those levels of scale. But if I'm getting into a new market out of state or out of city, then I'm trying to buy at least 10 to 15 units where it makes sense for me to hire a full-time property manager, 3-4 grand per month, full-time salary, W-2 employee, and then they can normally handle between 75 and 90 units by themselves.
Got it. Okay, so that's you figure those numbers down to the T2. So it's 75 to 100 units themselves, and you only want to go into a market that you're going to be buying 10 to 15 to help to scale
Minimum.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And they're full-time property manager where they're focused just on your assets. And then what's the best way to hire and find that person? Like, where are you finding the property managers
Out of
that are a
college,
good fit?
entry level. The more green, the better. And then I just teach them. I mean, it's not rocket science. It's mostly just organization and communication. If you can do that and you can find someone that's articulate and that's empathetic and, can understand their plight if there's an issue, that's the biggest thing. Because I've tried hiring, these 30-year veteran property managers, and they have their ways of doing things, and it's just not, we have our own policies, and it's
Yeah.
very strict, and we keep it that way.
No, I love it. That makes sense. That's really cool. That's good information. It's by the way, section8formula.com. That's section8formula.com. So we're going to shift to this part of the show where we talk about capital gains tax, right? And it may or may not be as big for some of these deals. Perhaps these are longer term holds and just cash flow, which typically means you're maybe just refinancing and therefore there's no capital gains tax event and you're just buying the deals, right? And so that is a great strategy, right? In fact, if you never sell and you only ever hold and don't take on too much leverage on a deal, and you're able to refinance and redeploy, has that been kind of your strategy so far?
I do sell, but I'm doing 1031s and just buying more units. I mean, that's really the only time I'm selling. Occasionally, I'll sell if I just get a crazy offer and there's nothing really else out there. Especially if the gain was so high, I'll just eat it. Or there's also a ton of depreciation, and I mean, there's a lot of expenses that come with the property, so I can offset a lot of these gains in another way.
Yeah, smart. Yeah, using the depreciation, or maybe do you do any accelerated depreciation, or is it not cost prohibitive because your deals are so small? Are you doing any of that cost seg?
We do cost seg, and I'm not buying onesie, twosie units anymore. I mean, when I'm buying these units, it's normally minimum 10 to 15 unit deals. I just bought 100 units in Jacksonville, North Carolina, a couple weeks ago. So for the most part, it does add up, and it is compound. So we do. I need to talk to my account about it, but we do cost segs on some of them. I have some Airbnbs that especially it makes sense to do cost seg analysis on it, but for the most part, I think it just accelerated depreciation.
Got it. Perfect. Yeah. Let's talk about the 100 units, right? So fast forward, that would be a great one because you can really start scaling on are you focusing mostly on bigger deals these days versus the smaller ones? So is that kind of your
Correct.
focus right now?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So then when you go to sell that, what's the plan would be to 1031 exchange that into bigger deals and just keep rolling that. At a certain point, certain clients get to the point where they want to sell high and buy low, but the 1031 can be a little bit of a challenge. So have you seen that with that 45-day 180? Any frustrations or challenges with the 1031?
I have, and I've had scenarios where I just dropped the 1031 altogether with that 45-day identification, 180-day close, because I mean, you're selling high and you have to buy high, right? And it's just frustrating, especially when there's all these other rules that come with it. I mean, there's times where I've just, said, forget it, just give me the cash. I'll figure it out with my accountant later and we'll, come up with expenses and give to charities. I mean, there's always things you can do to reduce that AGI. So we'll just kind of take it.
Yeah, that's very good. And by the way, if folks are wondering if there's a alternative to that, it's called a deferred sales trust. We can now save a failed 1031 exchange. It's not a Delaware Statutory Trust, and it gives you an opportunity to sell high and buy low when it makes sense for you. You can go to capitalgainstaxsolutions.com. That being said, are you ready for the lightning round, Tom?
Sure.
All right. Knowing what you know now, if you go back to your 20 or 25-year-old self, what's the one golden nugget to make sure to tell yourself to do?
Just get started. Buy that first unit. Do not do analysis paralysis. I deal with coaching all the time, and people get so stuck in doing this hardcore analysis on a $60,000 unit. It's very almost impossible to lose money in a $60,000 unit. Just buy it. Do your due diligence, obviously, but don't sit there for it. Because after you buy the first unit, it becomes addicting. As any investor will tell you, you're like, that's the case. So that's what I would say is start it as soon as possible and just make it happen.
Awesome. Second question: what's the number one book you've recommended or gifted the most in the past year?
I really like Fast Lane to Millions by MJ DeMarco. It's not a really big popular book like all the Robert Kiyosaki books, but I'm a huge fan of it. It's mostly a mindset book, really helps with explaining the differences in, finding your path and then being able to really execute on it. So I highly recommend it.
Excellent. And part of the Rich Dad Poor Dad lightning round strategy question, what's the one thing that you try to practice when it comes to building your business or your real estate as it pertains to Robert Kiyosaki's book?
Just the assets and liability thing. I mean, that's always something I've always struggled with. Is I've always wanted all the fast cars and the boats and all the rapidly depreciating liabilities. So keeping that in check, having enough assets to be able to pay for the fun, toys is something that I practice religiously because of those books.
Excellent. Love that. Second to last question. What are you most curious about right now?
I'm most curious about how to get to 1,000 units. It's obviously I'm buying 100, 150 at a time. And I find that the most interest from hedge funds and institutional buyers are at 1,000 plus units. So I'm most curious on either finding other people's money or self-funding until I can get to those 1,000 units. But it's just finding inventory, creative ways of finding off-market properties to continue buying at scale.
What about creative ways to raising capital? Like where you're partnering with people? I mean, there might be the IRA thing, there might be the 401k thing, or just capital from accredited investors. Like, have you ever thought about other ways to raise besides the more traditional ways?
I've never really wanted to get into syndication or really do anything where I'm raising, a ton of capital from a ton of investors and just it's just like a whole other business. And I really didn't want to do that. I have everything streamlined right now with property management and just doing it myself and not having to, have accountability to investors and go through all that headache. I understand that's the fastest way of doing it. I mean, I know I right now, just from my, following, I could probably raise $5 million in the next 24 hours to go buy, $15-20 million property. But I don't want that stress in my life.
Sorry about that. We had a little commercial break there for that blip. The restream went out a little bit, but yeah, that makes sense, right? Yeah, you don't need necessarily the extra headaches, right? For partners, right? If you could just do it yourself.
Exactly.
So, yeah, cool. So last question. After all your success, helping the people you've helped, building the real estate portfolio you have, how do you stay centered in your values, and how do you stay encouraged to charge forward to reach new heights?
That's a great question. I would definitely, I mean, I hate being cliche, but it's really true as far as the whole gratitude thing. Being able to just not take things for granted and really understand that like everything that I have now is something that I've wanted, for the last 10 or 15 years. And now that I have it, like I'm just constantly thinking about the future. And to stay centered, I'm just like trying to stay in the present before just like keeping, what I could get in the future in mind. So I think that's the biggest thing is just try to stay in the present, try to kind of enjoy the ride and go from there.
Fantastic. And I want to thank you for being on the show, Tom, and I want to thank you for having that entrepreneurial spirit, having the persistence and the stubbornness and the creativity to make deals work for yourself and to build your team and help people who need housing, right? And that's at the end of the day, I think that's one of the biggest crises in America, if not number one, is affordable housing. Definitely. And to be able to provide that management and that own those properties and be able to rent them to people is huge. And so I don't want to overlook that. And so for our listeners who want to get in touch with you, could you remind them one last time what's the best place for them to find you?
Yeah, you guys can follow me on TikTok. It's tcruznc. And then if you guys want to email me, it's just tom@tomcruz.com, TOMCRUZ. And then also Section 8 formula if you want to book a call with me or my team and we can discuss. I have a Section 8 coaching course and also coaching program. And we walk you through the entire process. We help you find your first Section 8 unit. We help you get set up with private lenders. We also help you find a tenant. So it's all included in that course program.
Awesome. Thanks, Tom, so much for being on the show. And also want to thank our listeners for listening to an episode of the Capital Gains Tax Solutions podcast, also stream on expertcresecrets.com, where we believe most high net worth individuals and those who help them, they struggle with clarifying their capital gains tax deferral options. Not having a clear plan is the enemy, and using a proven tax deferral strategy such as the Deferred Sales Trust and or buying some Section 8 housing with someone like Tom Cruz are the best ways to grow your wealth. Also, Deferred Sales Trust to defer capital gains taxes on cryptocurrency, businesses, real estate, save a failed 1031 exchange. Don't get caught in that 45-day window 180 without a clear plan to back up just in case it fails. Again, go to capitalgainstaxsolutions.com to learn more about that. And we also have our free mastermind every Friday, 10 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, 1 p.m. Eastern. We can learn all things about the Deferred Sales Trust. We have clients on there. We have CPAs, financial advisors, my business partners, and folks just like yourself learning about the Deferred Sales Trust for the first time and wanting to figure out a way to see if it's a good fit for you and your business plan. Again, go to capitalgainstaxsolutions.com to register for that. Thanks, everyone, for listening, and we look forward to